Hey YouTube, how's it going? Well, it's going pretty good. The weather is hot and ridiculous and nasty, and I don't care because I never go outside. I avoid that like the plague. I hate going outside because it's hot and uncomfortable. Yeah. So, in other ways that things are good, yesterday evening, a new episode of Hermitcraft is up. Link is of course in the description. And it's not necessarily the greatest episode in the world, but it's something, and I'm working on trying to get myself back to doing at least one or two a week. That is my preference, and we'll see what actually happens with that, and so on. It depends partly on pulling my head out of various and sundry distractions. One of those distractions is something that has become a major pastime for me, which is reading. And the specific reading matter is various and sundry assorted fan fiction writings. And yeah, there's tons. You know, there's like hundreds of thousands, perhaps I could easily say millions of fan fiction stories written that are stored on a number of websites. Most notably, in my case, there are 3 that I found to contain, I would say, a significant fraction. I almost said most, but I can't really say that, as I don't know. But there's an awful lot on fanfiction.net, Archive of Our Own, and Twisting the Hellmouth. Twisting the Hellmouth, of course, being one that is dedicated largely to fan fictions for the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show. And yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there. Granted, one of the things I have found about fan fiction is that the vast majority of it, sadly, the vast majority of it is crap. And this is not intended as a disrespect of those who have written. It's just simply a sad fact that when you take millions of people to write stories about things that they like, let's face it, most of it it's hard to read. And sometimes I'm talking literally. We'll talk about people that write stories in which you have, in 10-point font, you have a paragraph that takes up an entire screen. That is ridiculous. Very hard to read. You know, paragraphs should never be that long. But that's just one of a zillion examples. And I'm not just talking about people that want to come in and serve as a grammar Nazi or anything like that. No. It's just certain practices that make it actually difficult to read or even find the content in a story. Yeah. But I'm talking about what I talked about in the previous video is the idea of reviewing some fictions that I have read. And naturally, of course, I'm going to be sticking with stories that I like. And so for this vlog, we have a story called Xander Harris, The Iron Toweree. Now, let's see, I have to actually look at this to notice. Yeah. It was originally published in May of 2008. The most recent update was in May of 2011. So this is an old story, and given that it's been so long since the last update, it is probably a dead story. And yes, it is incomplete. 31 chapters have been written for a total of, let's see, 124,000 some odd words. That said, it's still a good story. Granted, you run right up to the end of it, and it stops on a cliffhanger, which, yes, that's infuriating, but the story that is there, the part of it that's there, is very good. Now this one is labeled as a YAHF, which is an acronym that means Yet Another Halloween Fiction. A fiction that is based around the season 2, episode 6, I believe it is, of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, titled Halloween, in which people who got their costumes or part of their costumes from Ethan's costume shop in Sunnydale turned into whatever their costume was. And so it became a very popular vehicle to change the story, to change the whole timeline even, depending on what you did. And the method was simple. You have one or more characters wear a different costume than what they did in canon. And in this story, we have everybody else is doing the same thing they did before, but Xander Harris finds himself wearing an Iron Man costume. And because Mr. Harris did not have a particular Iron Man in mind, something happened. Well, you're talking a Chaos Mage doing a Chaos spell fueled with extra juice from the Hellmouth, guaranteed to produce fun and chaos. And in this case, now what happens in those stories is when this spell happens, the person actually gets a copy of the mind of the individual they dressed up as, downloaded into their brains. Normally, when the spell breaks, all that goes away and they are maybe left with some memories, like Buffy ended up gaining some skill with the French language and stuff like that. And Xander Harris retained a bunch of memories from Soldier Guy when he dressed up as a soldier in the actual canon universe. In this case, Iron Man. So he gets Iron Man's memories, specifically Tony Stark's memories. But because he wasn't targeting a particular version, in this case, he got all of them. Now imagine, if you will, having every version of Anthony Edward Stark in your brain. All of them. There is a huge potential for disaster because most of them are alcoholics and have various and sundry addiction problems and so on. On the other hand, there's at least one of them that became Sorcerer Supreme, and so on and so forth. Xander does manage to get a handle on this, and he uses the Tony Stark knowledge and mental abilities and so on. He takes his road trip money and invests that and gets a definite payback for that, and then reinvests more and so on, and basically turns that money over into, eventually parlaying it into millions in the space of a month or two. And it uses this to fuel creating a computer system writing his own version of Jarvis, and starting, of course, to do all sorts of things, most definitely including creating the armor. And there are all sorts of adventures and hijinks and so on. Stargate becomes involved. Stargate Command becomes involved, and there is a whole lot. The story is fairly longish, I would say. It's not something you're going to read in one afternoon, but it's well worth reading, even though it's not finished. And it would be interesting if somebody were to take up the story and continue it onwards. I've thought about it, but I don't know. I haven't come up with a way to do that that would mesh really well with what the original author wrote. There is a companion story for this, because this is part of a series. The first one is the Xander Harris thing, and the second one is Harry Potter, Rise of the Iron Magius Supremus. Yeah. And now that one is much shorter. There are only 4 chapters and 9,600 words. But it's a very promising beginning to a story that I would love to see fleshed out to several 100,000 words. And I'd love to see another couple of 100,000 words popped onto the Iron Tari story. And I'd love to see it happen, but of course its last update was like 10, 11 years ago. Probably not going to happen. In any event, I have been yapping for entirely too long, so therefore it's time for me to shut up and say thanks for watching. Take it easy. I am out of here. Link to that story in the description.
Mr. TinFoilChef.